Okay, so this is the question. So now in this table, in this particular question, we are given this table, which is the employee table, and it has these columns: employee ID, department ID, and the primary flag, right? So employee ID and the department ID combination over here is the primary key for this table. Employee ID is the ID of the employee. Department ID is the ID of the department to which the employee belongs, and primary flag can be either Y or N, and that this primary flag basically indicates whether the current department in this current row for this employee is the primary department or not, right? So basically what we are saying is that an employee can belong to multiple departments. They can work simultaneously in different departments, but then out of all of those departments where that employee is working, only one will be his or her primary department. So that is what this primary underscore flag will be indicating, whether the current department is the primary department for that employee or not, right? If it is Y, that means it is primary. If it is N, that means it is not, right? But over here, there is a catch that for all the employees which belong to only one department and not more than one, that one and only department for them is by default their primary department, right? But the primary flag for that particular department will still be N, right? So we just have to assume that if an employee is belonging to just one department, then that is going to be their primary department, even though the primary flag for that record is going to be N. So that is one catch over here. That is one extra condition that we have to take care of, right? So maybe let's read the question once. So it says employees can belong to multiple departments. When the employee joins other departments, they need to decide which department is their primary department. Note that when an employee belongs to only one department, their primary column is N, right? That's what we discussed. We need to write an SQL query to report all employees with their primary department, right? For employees who belong to one department, report their only department, right? Because anyway, the primary flag for them will be N, right? So that's another condition that we have to check. And we can return the result table in any order, right? So that is what the question is saying. Now, before we proceed further, I would really encourage you to solve this question on your own first. At least try solving this question on your own and then watch my solution. And you should be doing this with all the questions, right? Now, it would have been a simple question where we would have just filtered out the records with primary flag value equal to Y. But there is an additional condition over here, as we discussed, which says that if an employee belongs to only one department, then that will be his or her primary department by default. But the primary flag for such cases would still be N, right? So we won't be able to use primary flag over here, right? This means we will have to find the count of every employee ID. Wherever the count is equal to 1, we can consider that department is primary, right? That only department with that row is primary. So we can use the count window function maybe over here and partition by the employee ID to find the count of the current, like the count of rows wherever the current employee ID is present, right? And then I can just put a filter condition on this count and the primary column with an OR operator in between, right? So now wherever the count will be equal to 1, I can say that that particular employee ID has occurred only once in the entire table. There is only one department ID for that particular employee. And so that is going to be their primary department by default, right? If count is not equal to 1, then I'm also checking if the primary flag for that particular department and employee is Y, right? So that I consider all the other cases wherever the employee IDs are linked to multiple departments, then I'm only selecting wherever the primary flag is Y, right? So I'm putting both these conditions, whatever we discussed previously theoretically, between an OR condition, right? So maybe let's see this in action. Let me just jump to my SQL server now. Okay, so this is my employee table, which is given to us, and this is what we saw in the slide as well. So we have this data. Now, to start with, what we can do is that we can just, as we were discussing, we can use the count window function over here, partitioning by the employee ID. So maybe let's start with that. I'll write select from employee first of all, and then in the select clause, I can write employee ID, primary flag, These are the things I'm going to select. And also I'm going to have another calculated column using count star, right? So I'm going to count the number of rows over partition by employee ID again, right? And I can just alias this column as CNT, right? Now what I need to do is I just need to see wherever the count, like the CNT value is 1, I can directly pick up that particular record, the employee ID, department ID of that particular record. And if it is not equal to 1, I will just check wherever the primary flag is equal to Y. I will pick the employee ID and department ID of those records as well, right? So I will simply maybe use an outer query over here to use the count that we just derived over here. So I will make a subquery out of this query, and I will say where my CNP is equal to 1 or the primary flag is equal to Y, right? Like this. And then I can just select the employee ID and the department ID over here, right? This query is going to give me all the primary departments satisfying both the conditions for every employee. Okay, so I did something wrong somewhere. Okay, this is fine. As CNT. Okay, I missed a from clause over here in the outer query. Now it should be fine. Yeah. So now I got the employee ID and the corresponding primary department for that particular employee. So this is the solution for this question. Thank you.